Welcome to the Public Library of Brookline's Spring Genealogy series. This workshop, Navigating Online Resources, is the second of three. A recording of the first, Organizing Your Research, is available on the library's YouTube channel. The third is on the topic of personal digital archiving and will take place at 3 p.m. on Wednesday, May 12th. I'd like to introduce our speaker, Seema Kenney. Seema got her start in the business of genealogy after completing the Genealogical Research Certificate Program at Boston University's Center for Professional Education in 2010. Since then, she has continued her education via ProGen and NIGR, as well as participating in genealogy societies, conferences, and webinars. Seema started exploring her family history while she was in high school. Her paternal family tree goes deep into colonial New England, especially in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Maine. She has English, German, and Swedish roots, and DNA recently added a branch to her family tree from the Netherlands. Seema has a BA in Spanish and Social Science and a BS in Management Information Systems and Business Administration. Her other hobbies include puzzles and needle arts. So thank you so much for being with us today, Seema, and I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, Britta. It's always a pleasure to have a chance to talk genealogy with anybody because my family is, as probably some of yours are, only slightly interested in knowing what I've found, unless, of course, it is somebody really famous, that they've heard of. And that's not happened, at least not enough for them. So everything Britta had in my introduction is 100% accurate, which is good because sometimes that does get messed up. I'm currently involved with the New England Regional Genealogical Consortium, and we have our conference going on right now. So that's been my big time thing for the last couple of weeks anyway. Well, couple of years actually. But it's great to take a break from that and actually do a little presentation from my office here. So let me see if I can get there we go. So today is to talk about doing some genealogical research, on the internet, which if you've, been home for the past year and you've been doing genealogy for any amount of time, I'm sure that you've probably already done a little of this. But a lot of what we're going to talk about works not only for doing genealogy, but also for doing other research on the internet. So while this is geared towards genealogy, the little tips and tricks I have for you are good for anything else that you might be researching. So I am going to cover some techniques, some sources, things that you might find, because not everything you find is exactly what you're looking for, of course. Some ways to continue your education, because I'm big on education. I think that's an important thing, and you should know how to get some more of it. The nice thing with online education is you can get the education that you need when you need it and not have to wait for a class or take a class, 3 months before you can apply anything. And I'll definitely give you some of the popular sites that the genealogists are using to get some of their family history information. Of course, websites can change. I did update this a couple of weeks ago. That doesn't mean that something hasn't changed since then, but we'll hope that everything has stayed the same. And all the sites that I mentioned in here are in the handout that Britta is going to send you. So I can certainly back up if somebody needs to see something longer in order to write it down, but you will be getting it. And I did make them all active links on the handout. So when you get it, you should be able to just click on them and visit some of the sites. So let's start with one of the places that you might not consider looking for your family history. And that's just a regular search engine, whether you use Google, Yahoo, MSN, Bing, or one of the hundreds of others that are out there. Depending on what type of person you're looking for, what you already know about them, and where they lived, just putting in somebody's name can get you some information like newspaper articles, magazine articles, maybe some information about a history, you might put in their location just to learn something about where it was that they lived or worked, or find a map that would show you how they commuted. I have a lot of ancestors who lived in Maine and worked in Boston in the late 1800s. And I wouldn't do it today, so I don't know how they did it way back then. But it would be interesting to see the path that they took. And the reason we want to look for a lot of these is, if we're talking family history, we're not just talking names and dates. We're talking about learning something about what they did with their life, what their life was like. And I am going to talk to you about some of the little techniques here that will help you to narrow down some of these search results, because we all know that if you go in and type, George Washington into Google, you are going to get thousands, if not millions, of responses, and that's not what any of us want to have to go through. So we'll look at how to make the results a little easier to work with. So the first thing to learn as you're searching on the internet, and it doesn't matter if this is within a database or if it's just at a search engine or on another search site, is how to search for a phrase. And in order to do this with a phrase, you want to put your phrase inside quotation marks. So you can see at the end of the slide here where I have some examples. John William Ellis is my maternal great-grandfather, well, one of my maternal great-grandfathers. If I wanted to look for his name, by putting things into quotation marks, I am telling the system, don't just look for these characters, because that's exactly what the search engine is doing. It's saying, I'm going to look for these characters. And you may have found that sometimes you'll look for John and it'll come back with Jonathan, or, any other combinations of things that might include the letters John or Jon, depending how it's spelled. When we put it in quotation marks, we're telling the system, I want these characters in this exact order. Now, if something was on the internet and it didn't have great-grandpa's middle name, it's not going to find it if I search for John William Ellis. So I might have to search multiple times to get all the different combinations of first, middle, and last name. But it does make a big difference to narrow down the results that I'm getting. Reading homemakers, I have a slide here. This is my paternal grandmother's obituary. And I put the little gold box down there where it says one of the things, this is an old well, I shouldn't say it's old, because I did just barely get born before she died. So it can't be old, because I don't want to think that I'm old. She did, but it does mention in here some of the groups that she belonged to, and one of them was Reading homemakers. So this would have been in the 1940s and 50s. I was kind of curious, like, what are the Reading homemakers? I mean, I know they weren't watching TV in the 40s and 50s, so, what were the Reading homemakers doing? I did the search. It's in the box on the right-hand side for Reading homemakers, just a Google search. And I was able to see that, in that second one, the Reading homemakers had a Christmas party. And this is like 15 years after my grandmother had died. So obviously it was a group that lived on. I still haven't figured out exactly what they do, but there's plenty of little things here from the Bridgeport newspaper, which is close to where Grandma lived, telling me about their different meetings. And I'm sure if I go and read all those articles and everything, I would learn a lot about what that group was. And I might even find Grandma's name as an officer or a hostess, or maybe they met at her home, who knows? So even the little things like that, where you just want to know, like, what does this mean when it says they're an officer or a member of, what did that group do? Because it's going to tell you something about what that ancestor did. Some of the other things that you might do when you're searching in order to reduce those results that you're getting is you might want to use a Boolean search. If you do a lot of math, you'll recognize the word Boolean because it's a mathematical term. But sometimes you want to use the word and. This slide is wrong. I'm going to have to change that question on there. But I don't want to know about all the Masons. I have a long family history of belonging to the Masons organization. I only want to know about the Masons that were in Torrington. So I can put that word "and" in my search, and I'm going to get things about Masons that were in Torrington. I might even have to go and say "and Connecticut." I don't think there's any other states with a Torrington, but who knows? I might be looking for a couple and put the word "and" between their names so that I get the right, John Smith and Mary Elizabeth is a lot different than just looking for John Smith, right? The worst thing that any genealogist wants to have to look for is John Smith. And yet we probably all have a Smith in our family tree. I think I've found 4 in mine. In addition to using an "and," what you might need to do, if you get a real lot of results on a quick search, you might need to use an "and not." So here I've maybe done a search for biomedical engineering and went, ugh, too many results. So I might have to add some things in there. I'm looking for it in relationship to cancer, but not the department of and not the school of. I'm looking maybe for articles that an ancestor wrote or something about research that was being done. But I don't need to see, the university of and one for each state or whatever that happens to have a biomedical engineering department. So and not can help you both to kind of reduce that overwhelming allotment of research results. And there's one more Boolean search that you might want to try, and that's to use the word "or." So in English, all you have to do is listen to any little thing on the television or the radio, and you quickly learn that there are several terms that kind of sort of mean the same thing, and whether they should or not, they get used interchangeably. So you might want to, instead of doing 2 searches or 3 or 4 searches, if you use the word "or," I could look for something and say, I'm looking for women or females in a particular search, because some people are going to call them women, some are going to say they're females. Who knows? I probably could find something else that says they're girls, even though they're in their 40s or something, depending on the author and the time frame. Certainly in genealogy, we know that there are different spellings, right? Even Kenney has 3 or 4 different spellings, depending on which part of Ireland you were in and who was lazy and left, just put 1 E and a Y and whatever. So putting in that "or" can help you to search all the spellings at once. So and then again, if you're looking for something in a foreign language, there's what we call it and there's what that country calls it. So looking for something and saying, I'm looking for the French might not get you all the articles. You might want to put in there French or Francais, since that's how the French say French. You may not get all the accent marks, and you may actually end up with an article that's in French, which is a whole nother set of problems to deal with. But boy, if that article has exactly what you're looking for, it's worth having it translated and figuring it out from there. So 3 different ways that 4 different ways, if we count the quotation marks, that you can kind of reduce some of those results that you might get using a search engine and sometimes even within databases. Now, most of these, if you're searching in a database, there's usually a section at the top that will say like advanced search, or it may just say the word advanced. These are the kind of things that will pop up in that advanced area. So hopefully if you've kind of grasped this and you read it through on the handout, you'll be more comfortable too to click that advanced button and maybe be able to answer some of those questions a little differently, just because they're laid out for you and you don't have to really think about it. Another thing that will help a lot with searching, especially in databases, is to use wildcards. Now, an asterisk is the most common wildcard, and an asterisk says, I don't care how many characters are in between or take up the space where I'm putting an asterisk. I just want to see all the results. So Smith and Smythe, right, whether it's spelled with an I or a Y, if I simply put an asterisk in there, I'm going to get both SMITH and SMYTH, but I'm also going to get smooth, anything else that starts with SM and ends in TH. I'm going to get a lot more than I want. Same thing with EL star S or W star M. I'm going to get a lot more maybe than what I want. So the other wild card that people aren't as familiar with is to use a question mark. And for some of us, we might remember that one of the first computer type things that came out for personal use was a little gadget that you would use with your crossword puzzles, and you could put in and say, it starts with A and it's 6 letters and it's got, you know, an S or a T at the end or whatever. The question mark is kind of like that. You get to identify exactly how many letters. So each question mark represents one letter. So if I'm not sure, is it going to be Ellis with an I, Ellis with an E? I learned this when I started doing my English research. In my family, it was always Ellis with an I, but when you get over to England, it's one L, it's got an E, all kinds of crazy spellings. The question mark will give me the I's and the E's. Same thing with the white with a question mark. I'm going to get the I's as well as the Y's. For William, I put in enough question marks that I'm making sure that I get the ones that are I-L-L-I. If somebody has transcribed it with 3 L's, well, 3 L's and minus one of the I's, I would get it. And that can happen with OCR because an I with a dot often gets OCR'd, or optical character recognition. It gets read as an L. And that might be a reason that I want to do something like that in case it is typed in as WLLLIAM or WILLLAM. So these are all techniques that can help you search down and find maybe the exact record you're looking for, or maybe allow you to do one search where you might have before done 2 or 3 different searches. So that's all I wanted to talk about as far as techniques, just to give you some background and some ideas on how you might make your life just a little bit easier. So now let's look at some of the databases or the websites that you might want to start using for your genealogy. And I'm going to start by just going over different types of sites. Now, these sites that are listed here are portals. A portal is kind of like, for those of us that can remember, the card catalog in the library, right? You went to the drawer, you opened it up, and you looked and you went, oh, great, there's 25 different Nancy Drew books I can go find on the shelf, right? That's what I remember doing in the library as a kid, find the Nancy Drew books. These are places that are going to take you to other websites, which means they're categorized. Cindy's list is now at least 25 years old. It may even be a little older than that this one person, Cindy Engel, has been gathering up websites, and they're all very organized. You can go to her site and you can look by ethnicity. You can look by the type of website you're looking for. You know, is it a historical society? Are you just looking for history information, whatever? It's a wonderful site, and she's very congenial about having you write and tell her, hey, this link is broken, or I found this other site and I don't see it on your site. She's happy to add more. Some of these, you'll get a little bit better service if you can do it through your library, and we'll let Britta talk to you about any of those that you might need to use. They're library oriented, but a lot of them allow the public to use them to look for other articles, books, magazines, and websites. Of course, we have online subscriptions. If it's a subscription, it's probably going to ask you for some sort of payment. You're going to have to figure out, you know, maybe a free subscription for a week or 2 weeks or a month. But American Ancestors, which is the New England Historical and Genealogical Society in Boston, we have Ancestry.com, which you may be able to access through the library as well. Find My Past is an English site, does a lot for the Great Britain. So if you're looking for English information, that might be a good place to go. Fold 3, originally independent, it's now part of Ancestry, but that's military records. Genealogy Bank for newspapers, and MyHeritage for European records. That's actually a company that's out of Israel. And knowing where the company is located just helps, because if that's where they're located, that's probably what their initial focus was. It doesn't mean it's what it is today, but that's going to be their stronghold for information. I highly recommend that even if you don't get a subscription at some of these places, if you're interested in English or Irish research, or you're interested in doing European research, go in and see if you can get on their mailing list. Almost every site that is a subscription site is going to have some day during the year, many of them have multiple days, where you can get free access. So we're coming up, let's see, it's the middle of April, so Mother's Day and then Memorial Day. There's probably going to be free access to certain records, right? Memorial Day will be a big one for Fold 3 because Memorial Day is military. They tend to do their free access on a military type holiday. Mother's Day, you tend to get, maybe some records to free access to, maybe church records or females that served in the military at a certain time. Who knows, maybe yearbooks or something. But they usually try to find something to kind of pull you in. Now, if you can find one of these sites for a foreign country that you're researching, all the better, because their free days come on their holidays. So, Memorial Day, let's hope maybe this year we'll get to have a little picnic, be out with a few family. Who's got time on that day to be researching? I mean, I'd love to, but if my family's inviting me for a picnic, I probably need to go to that. But then again, when it comes around to the end of June and the Swedish site is offering me a free weekend because it's their big Swedish holiday, we don't have an American holiday at the same time, so I don't have that automatic conflict. So it's another great place to look for some things and take advantage of what you can as far as what they offer for free. And you'll get that information in their newsletters, as well as postings on social media and other areas as well. Don't forget about historical societies. I went in and looked for the history of Brookline, and I came up with 3 new places to put on this site. The top site is our local Upton Historical Society, and then these other 3 are for Brookline. But it doesn't matter where your ancestors were from. It can be anywhere around the country. Look for a historical society that is in the area where they lived. They may have photos of your ancestors. They may have mementos that your ancestors left behind. They may simply have items from that time period and be able to, tell you something about the time period that your ancestor lived in the town. You never know if you're able to visit them, if they're close enough by. They may even, I've heard plenty of stories of societies where if you call ahead and say, gee, I'm coming, right? Because a lot of them are only open. One of my favorites, it's open for 2 hours on Thursday afternoon. So, but they're all volunteers. There's only so much they can do. But if you call ahead, most of the time they will make an appointment that you can come in. And if you tell them who you're researching or what you're researching, I've heard plenty of stories of ones where they will actually find living cousins and have them meet you there. So you not only get the benefit of their resources, but you get to meet somebody who maybe knew your ancestor or has stories about your ancestor. So it's another place, another resource to definitely look for. And of course, right now we got to start online because we have to figure out if they're open or not open before we start traveling. So libraries. I live about halfway between Boston and Worcester. So Boston and Worcester libraries both. You can get electronic library cards. They have huge genealogical collections, so you can take advantage of whatever's online. But even just their card catalogs, so that, you know, most of us genealogists are going to get out of this pandemic with more pages of things we need from different libraries and repositories than we can ever possibly go find. But you will also find that these larger libraries, they will have access to databases that your smaller local libraries may not have. You know, they're very expensive, and no library is going to be able to afford to buy them all, because that's not the part of the town budget or the city budget that tends to get a lot of money. So it doesn't hurt to look and see what kind of things they have. Well, I know both Boston and Worcester, they have a section right on their website that says genealogy sources. You can click on it and it'll lead you to several other options of things you can do through the library. The Digital Public Library of America is another great place. It's a big collection from many libraries, archives, and museums. They have over 16 million things that you can look at. And because it comes from all over the country, you just don't know what you're going to find for the location where your ancestors lived. And then the New York Public Library has over 700,000 prints, photos, maps, manuscripts, and videos, a lot of which are online. And you can, again, just get a glimpse into what was life like. And it's not just for the city of New York. So it's, again, worth checking out unless you have one of these families that has never moved and never visited anywhere close to New York. So other online sources, if you want to share your tree, there are plenty of places. Obviously, Ancestry, if you've seen any of their commercials, you know that they encourage you to build a tree and keep it online. But there's other places that you might decide you want to put your tree. Any of these four are possibilities, along with several others. You might decide that what you want to do on the internet and for your genealogy is maybe you need to look up some living people. If you're doing some work with DNA, obviously it's living people that have taken the test, and you're probably going to want to try to catch up with them. These living people resource sites can help you to find them. And then, unfortunately, we do use the term stalk them. We need to find a better word for that. But, you know, do your best to get to a point where you're comfortable that you can send them a nice email that says, oh, this is why I'm interested in finding you. And I think, you know, we share family, and I'd love to share with you what I have and all that nice kind of stuff. And who knows, you know, you may end up with a nice family reunion out of it. Don't discount your social media. Not that I can tell you much about any of these, because I'm not a social media person yet. But social media can be a great way to find cousins, right? You can put little announcements on your Facebook page about the ancestry you've been researching, the great story you just found. And that might interest some cousin who recognizes a surname or something. And same thing with blogging. Starting your own blog can be the best way to bait your cousins into getting in touch with you. Putting something on a blog, which is not difficult to start. The difficulty is in keeping it up and adding articles all the time. But anything you put in the headline of a blog is searchable as part of a search engine search like Google or Yahoo or MSN. So if you put up that story, and I did do this for a little while, I put up a story about, let's see, a great uncle, Paul Holmberg. So by putting his name in the title, anybody who went on the internet searching for Holmberg, as long as they spelled it the same way that I did, my article should come up in their results. Now, it maybe was on page 20 and they never saw it, but if they put in Paul Holmberg with quotes, maybe it showed up at the top of their list. They might have then contacted me to say, well, what do you know about him, and how are you related, and whatever. And I could tell them loads of stories, because he was one of my favorite great uncles, and I have a great picture of him holding my son at Uncle Paul's 80th or 90th birthday party. And and all the memories that go with it, because I remember all the people that my son dirtied his diaper on during that birthday party. Nothing more embarrassing for a mother. Oh, sure, hold my kid, and then you take them back and, there's crap all over the person's shirt. That's not cool. So blogging can be very good for finding living cousins if that's what you're looking for. And, all of us do genealogy for different reasons, and we're all looking for different things. So we want to know lots of ways to find both the dead and the living. So let's take a few minutes here and look at the different types of records that you might find on the internet. And certainly one of the things that's very common to find is some sort of an index. Just like when we were kids and we got excited to do our history report, you looked in the back of the book to find out, does this book include George Washington? Does it include Abraham Lincoln, whatever you were looking at? This is a list, I think it's at the state level, of existing births, marriages, and deaths by town, by surname. But all it tells you is that, in Sherborne, which was in Middlesex County, yes, there is a marriage record, maybe more than one, for somebody with the last name Badcock, spelled with 2 A's. Now, the B with a line after it just means all they can determine from the handwriting is that it starts with a B. So that's something that if I was looking, no matter what name I was looking for on here, I would want to look at that top one, because you don't know what they can't read. And maybe you can read it. Now, if they're all in Andover and I'm not looking in Andover, then that's a different story. I may not need to look at it. But all of these with the yeses are clickable links that if I had this, on my computer, I'd be able to click and start to get more information on these. But again, it's just an index. It's just telling me that there is a record with this person's name. I can maybe tell by town and county if it's something I'm definitely interested in, but I need more information. So one of the things that's really nice to find, if you can, is an abstract. Now, this is from Ancestry and their collection of naturalization records. This is one of those cards that was created as part of the WPA. And they went down and they abstracted what they considered to be important information. So the important things there, they abstracted what they thought was important information. It's somebody else's interpretation of what shows up on the record and what's important. But it does show me that the record exists. Now, there's a couple of typos or mistranscribed things in here, and that's okay. I still know it's the person I was looking for. His first name is actually Meterick, not Mettery. So it's a guy, not a girl. And he was a priest who emigrated from Canada down to Rhode Island. I was researching him for one of my friends. This is great information to have. He came from Canada. He was about 31 when he was naturalized. He was naturalized in Rhode Island. I like all of that. But it's not the full record. It's still only pointing me to another record that exists that I need to go to find the best information. So the actual card that was created as part of the WPA is this white card here. This is the actual card, and it has several pieces of information that were not in that abstract. Okay. Not only was he naturalized in Rhode Island, he was naturalized at the Circuit Court in Providence. Now, Rhode Island's not that big, so it may not be a big deal, but if it had been another state, I would definitely want to know what court. Not only did he come in 1883, he came in June of 1883. And at the very bottom, it tells me the names of 2 witnesses that were there for his naturalization. Well, if you think about it, who are you going to take to court to swear that you're a good person and you are who you say you are and you've lived here as long as you say you have? You're not dragging somebody in off the street. right? You're taking your brothers, your uncles, your cousins, your neighbors that have lived near you. So I want to know those names of who his witnesses were. Those are actually both relatives of his, which I didn't know until I did some further research. And of course, there's some spellings because they didn't get all the French names spelled right and all of that. But I want all this information off of this original record. It's still not the best record I want to look for, but it was good to use as a sample here. So one of the things I want to look for when I find one of these original records is, first of all, I want to get it to a point whether I have to zoom or shrink it on the screen so that I know I'm seeing all four corners. You see here, I tried very hard to show you that this is the four corners of the little index card. The little hole in the bottom there is because they were kept in a little box like a card catalog. So there was a pole going through. Britta probably remembers the card catalog, and you had to pull the pole out in order to fit the new cards in. And that way people couldn't rip them out, right? So that's what the circle at the bottom is. But I want to make sure they got all the edges. I want to make sure maybe I'm going to have to lighten and darken it, because in case anybody wrote any notes on it in pencil or in a rubber stamp, you know, a lot of times they'll put a date on with a rubber stamp. That ink tends to fade faster than typewritten ink. So I may need to play with the darkness in order to see those things if they're on there very lightly. So I like this because it is an image, but it's still not the actual document for his naturalization. I still, if I want the original document, I need to go to the circuit court in Providence, and I need to see if they still have any of these documents from 1893. They may or they may not, but I need to go further because this is good, but it's not the original document that I'm probably going to want if it's my family history. So where are you going to go to learn more about genealogy? There are several places, and more now that we've gone through a pandemic and everybody's put everything online. But these are just some of the more popular ones. There's a company, Legacy Family Tree, that does webinars every week, sometimes 2 a week. They're usually on Wednesday afternoon at 2 o'clock. But if you miss the original, it's available for free for a week. You can listen to it, you know, every Friday or every Saturday, whatever you want, for as long as you want. It's free for that 1 week. Ancestry and Family Search both have learning centers, and Family Search is a .org because it's a nonprofit. It is a free site. If you cannot access Ancestry either through your library or through a subscription, which gets very expensive, try familysearch.org. It is as big, sometimes I think it's bigger than Ancestry. It is run by the Church of Latter-day Saints, and they will ask you to make an account. So you do have to put in your email and come up with a password, but they will not charge you. And again, both have learning centers, both have lots of social media posts and things so that you can always learn more about what's going on, as well as newsletters that will tell you, you know, we added 2 million extra records this week about, and they'll give you the different ethnicities or countries or things that they apply to. I forgot to take the EOGN calendar link out of there because he's actually not putting his calendar up right now because there's so much online. But conferencekeeper.org, if you're looking for other genealogy meetings or conferences or institutes, they are a great place to look for any type of a conference, but they do have a special section for genealogy. And NERGC is the New England Conference. We have it every other year, and it's always in the odd numbered years. So it is going on right now, and we'll have it again in 2023, when hopefully we can all meet in person and chit chat and share our stories about our ancestors and things. So there's a lot of education, especially right now, a lot of available education out there on the web. Ancestry and Family Search Learning Centers and the Family Tree webinars are great because if you all of a sudden, as I did with the DNA, all of a sudden I have this new branch of the family from the Netherlands, I can just go there and start learning about how to do research on the Netherlands. What's special about their records? What should I be looking for? And I don't have to wait for a class to come around or a speaker to come locally to a facility near me or anything. I can just go get it when I need it, which is so much better than having to wait around for something, especially if you get excited about finding new stuff for your family tree. So let's take a look then at some popular websites. Again, these are all on your handout that you're going to get from Britta. So familysearch.org, I mentioned that a few minutes ago, free, use it to your heart's content. I will tell you, they do allow you to build a tree there. And I will tell you, it's not my idea of something I want to do, but you should know about it. If you build a tree at Family Search, their idea is they want to build the one world tree. They want to prove that all of us are related in some way. So as soon as you get an ancestor into your tree that's also in someone else's tree, it will automatically link your trees. That can be great because you get all the research that they've already done. But it also can send you down, lots of rabbit holes, and it does make it a little harder to keep track of your own research versus the research that someone else has done. But it is available and it is free, which is my favorite 4-letter F word. So, I have to remember to mention it. The Library of Congress has some wonderful genealogical resources, all again free because they're governmental information, as does the National Archives. Let's hope that they can open up again very soon. And then US Gen Web is a great place to go look up a state and a county and get specific information, especially, if you've got ancestors that lived really far away from here and in a totally different type of environment than what we're used to. And you just want to learn a little bit about what they have there. Now, the rest of the websites I'm going to talk about, I've kind of put into categories. So here's 4 websites that you might look at to find information, pictures of tombstones or death information on various ancestors. Find a Grave is now purchased and belongs to Ancestry. It started out as a community donated, crowdsourced kind of a thing. If you like to visit cemeteries and you like to do photography, you can take pictures of the tombstones and upload them to the site. You can also just sign up and say, I'm a volunteer. So if somebody writes in and says, hey, such and such a cemetery that happens to be near you, they want a picture of a particular grave, you could just service that type of a customer as well. And they do have over 160 million, so there's plenty there to look for. Interment.net has listings from records and cemeteries all over the United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Ireland, and a few other parts of the world, all for genealogical research. Deathindexes.com is a directory of online death record indexes that's out there by state. So it may also have an index for obituaries or burials. So that might be another good place, especially if you're looking for something from outside of New England. Billiongraves.com, which also has an app, and maybe some of these others do as well. Searchable by GPS cemetery data, and that's another crowdsourced. People have taken photos and uploaded things. About 3 years ago, when I looked at Billion Graves and went to a talk about it, very accurate for the West because it's created by some people out in Utah. And my gosh, 100% coverage out there, very little for New England. Could have changed in the last 3 years, who knows? But just so you have a basis of, don't set your expectations too high. I never like to do that. If you're looking for military information, there is a website about American battle monuments for veterans that are buried beyond the US shores. So if you have somebody who died in Europe during one of the 2 world wars and may still be buried over there, that would be a good place to look for them. Civil War sailors and soldiers, great reference for anybody that you think served during the Civil War. Daughters of American Revolution, you can look at their website. You can look at applications that people have made based on a given ancestor, and you may find connections to your family tree. And you may find that it doesn't take you much to join if you can link into an existing member's application. Gravesite Locator will help you to find anybody who's buried in a veterans cemetery anywhere in the country. So again, if you've got the military service, it's not a bad idea to go looking at some of these. There's certainly plenty of veterans who took advantage of the veterans cemetery and the veterans headstones. And both of those create documents that can be very helpful in your research. How about immigration? Because most of us are interested in that first ancestor that stepped off the ship, right? Landed on the shores. ellisisland.org, which was only open from 1892 to 1924. I say only because when you think about how many people came through, that's, 32 years is not a long time for the millions and millions of people that came through there. Bremen passenger list, those would be emigration notes. If you have people that left Germany between 1920 and 1939, Bremen is in northern Germany. That might be worth looking at, although I know it has some holes in it. So definitely make sure you've looked to see where the holes are. And if you're like me, of course, it's the years that your ancestors left. Earlier immigration to New York was handled on the state level. So the website is castlegarden.org. That would have immigration information from 1820 to 1892. And then Cook County Circuit Court, which Cook County is in Illinois, but they have, for some reason, a very, very large database of naturalization petitions from 1871 to 1929. So certainly if you had anybody who was passing through Illinois, anywhere near Chicago, on their way west, and it might be a great location to look at because the 3 portions of immigration, you did not have to do them all in the same place. They may very well have done a piece of it while they were in Illinois and then moved on further west before finishing their naturalization, because there was always a 2 to 3, if not 5 or 6 year period between the various steps. So I suppose it's kind of nice that they didn't make you sit in one place for all that time waiting for something to happen. Other things, of course, that genealogists really like are maps. I like this first one here because it's historical county boundaries. So you can actually see how the county boundaries have changed over time. It's always important to know, that piece of land that your ancestor was on, what county, what town was it in at the time they were there. It may look like your ancestor moved, but probably the boundary moved around them. So you want to make sure you're looking at the right information. Historical geography of the US is basically the same thing as on a grander scale. So it's going to show you more like the state borders and what was a territory. I think we all remember the Louisiana Purchase and looking at, wait, what do you mean Louisiana touches Canada? Like, that's not how I learned the map of the United States, but at the time it touched Canada. And then the University of Southern Maine has a really large map collection. It includes maps from all over the nation, and they're online for free. So if you're definitely a map person and you're looking to add map information to your genealogy, that could be another good site to check out. And almost lastly, newspapers, of course. We want those newspaper articles about the little tiny things that say, I went to visit somebody. You know, the social media of the 1800s was the newspaper, and the early 1900s. So you've got Chronicling America, which is run by the Library of Congress. They are trying to get these smaller newspapers from the 1800s, basically, digitized and available. They're not looking to do like the New York Times and the Boston Globe, but they're looking for the smaller ones. And that's only because they know that the bigger ones are getting done by other groups. Elefind does collections of newspapers, might be another place to look. Again, if you're looking for those groups at the end of an obituary, or you're looking for articles that talk about, I don't know, I've done some free newspaper weekends, and I have found my paternal grandmother's name in more newspapers than I could ever possibly count because she was so active in so many groups. And then Gen Disasters, a great place if you're looking to find out an area that was affected by a natural disaster. You know, it's nice to know about, my father has always talked about the flood of 55 and how it impacted his house and how his house was flooded. So it's a good place to do things like that and find out more about exactly how much of an area was the disaster, you know, covering and what kind of things were going on. And then of course with Google, if you're looking at Google, make sure to look at some of their other sites and other tools they have. Books.google.com has a lot of family histories. They had a project at one time where they wanted to digitize all the books that were out of copyright. So there's a lot of family histories and genealogies and things in that collection. It's worth going in and typing in a surname with the word genealogy or family and see what you can find. Some of them can be downloaded. I just always caution people, don't hit the print button until you've looked at it, because if you think about it, books that are out of copyright are old. Many of them, especially the family histories, are typed, which means they're only typed on one side of the paper because that's what we were taught to do on a typewriter. But Google taught all of their scanning people, you must scan both sides of the page. So I can't tell you how many books I have downloaded that, oh my gosh, it's 100 pages. No, it's 50 pages because every other page is blank. But they had to scan it because that was the rule. So I'd like you to learn from, you know, the silly things I do, like hit print and then print 50 or 25 blank pages. News.google.com, again, they started doing a newspaper project. They gave up on it after a little while, but it doesn't hurt to check. And then, of course, they have all these other ones. I would definitely use Google Alerts if you haven't used it before. If you have a surname, Britta might be a good her surname. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but that might be a good one to put out there. I wouldn't do it for Smith, Jones, Brown, White, but if you have a name that's not real common, and I have done it for a couple of my German lines, you can set up a Google alert, and every time that name shows up in a newspaper or anything that Google is searching, it will send you an email. Well, I am all for Google doing my research for me. That sounds like a really cool idea. Hasn't found anything that I really want, but I have alerts set up, you know, for my own name. So anytime I'm speaking somewhere and they put something up on in a paper or on the internet, I get an alert that my name showed up. I also have a couple of the surnames in my family up there for alerts. Of course, the maps, the Google Earth, Google Scholar will get you more of the scholarly journals and things. So if you have an educator or you have someone who published things like a scientist or something in your family, you might want to look there. If you have anybody who got patents, I have a great uncle on my mother's side. I have 6 of his patents hanging on my wall. my kids always tease me, Mom, that's a marble on a string. I don't care. He invented it first and got the patent. That makes it special. I don't care that it's a patent for a silly thing. He got the patent. And of course, if you're doing any documents in other languages, Google Translate is as good a place as any to get started trying to see what that document might say and whether it truly is the document you think it is. So I'm pretty sure that's all I have. Yep, I'll leave that one up just in case people want to write any of those down. So Britta, if we have any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Seema. I haven't seen anything come through the chat yet. At this point, if you do have a question, you're welcome to unmute yourself for the time it takes to ask. While you're thinking about it, I actually wanted to ask something if I could.
Sure.
I noticed a few times you referenced the many changes and updates that these sites have constantly.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about, how often do you recommend going back into the same source and repeating the same search? I think that, relying on the email newsletters to let you know when new records have been added is a great idea. Do you have any other tips along those lines?
Well, that's where, sometimes that's where the Google alerts will come in. They don't always search the databases, but you never know what they are searching and what might come up. But yeah, and that's why, getting those newsletters is so important, just so that hey, we added records today from Switzerland. Well, if you've been trying to find something, this is the time to go look. And they do add them, or they not only add new records, but they enhance existing collections. So, Ancestry's been big lately about advertising their yearbook collection, because something that supposedly not too many other people have. And of course, who doesn't like a yearbook? Because you get a photo. Plus you get all the little tidbits of what they did in high school and everything. They recently updated their yearbook collection, so they have even more now. And I think the last announcement I had, it just said, like, we've added these years to our collection. So you want to look at them from two different aspects. Like, was this document ever there before, or did they just fill in that hole that, of course, is where my ancestor was and I couldn't find them before? Maybe I should go look now.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We have a question from Lisa. What software do you use for building your family tree, and are there others you like?
Mm-hmm. I like to fool myself into thinking that my family tree is really on my computer and not on the internet. But that's very hard, because when you start at Ancestry, it's very hard to stick with your rule. My rule was no living people in my tree on Ancestry. And that's very hard because sometimes they add people in that I forget they're even adding. But I have used Family Tree Maker on my desktop for years. And they are connected with Ancestry. So there's actually a thing in there where you can actually sync it with your Ancestry account. I also have a copy of Roots Magic on my desktop. I have used Legacy Tree. I don't have a Mac, but I know most Mac users end up using a program called Reunion. If you simply go to a search engine and you type in genealogy software, you will get a list of like 20 different softwares, and most of them have free downloads. So if you haven't started any yet, I would recommend you download something for free. If you decide you really don't like it, they all use the same file formats. So it's not like Word and WordPerfect where they had different file formats. All the genealogy programs use the same format. So if you've entered, let's say, even 4 people into a tree, and then you decide, oh, I don't like the way this software works, I'm going to try a different one, you can export your tree from the first one and then import it to the second one, so you don't have to re-enter those people all over again, which is really handy. Because sometimes you don't know that you don't like it until you're way into it. And I don't want anybody to feel like you're stuck. I actually use both Family Tree Maker and Roots Magic because there are things I like about one and then other things I like about the other. And I constantly am exporting and importing my tree depending on what part of the project I'm working on. So I don't even have the whole tree in either software at this point. but I will be fixing that later this year.
Thanks for that question. And I would put in a quick plug for the video recording from the first workshop in this series, Organizing Your Research. One of the presenters there went very deep into the different software options, including lots of screenshots, so you can get a sense for them. So that's on YouTube again. Question from Susan. I have an ancestor whose obituary says she immigrated from Scotland to Georgia in 1872. Savannah is not a place I've found passenger lists for easily. Any tips?
Ooh, Savannah. Yeah, well, of course, the problem is that they could have come into any port and then taken a train to get there. The thing that I would do, one of the things I recommend when I talk about immigration is shipping lines, shipping companies, however we want to refer to them, they worked in the 18 and 1900s. They worked a lot like airlines do today. They tended to have certain places that they went to. So if you can research what shipping lines went into Savannah and where they came from, that may tell you or give you another clue on if you get the shipping line, let's say it's White Star, which is, the one from the Titanic. You could then look up White Star and see like what the routes were and maybe see if it fits with the travel pattern. But I wouldn't be surprised that they could have just as easily come into New York and then taken a train. So
thank you.
Yeah, it's a hit or miss kind of thing.
Great, thank you. Any other questions before we close? All right, well, I want to thank Seema again for sharing all that expertise with us. And I bet people are going to be running to their computers to start looking up some of these websites.
Absolutely.
So thank you,
Good.
everyone, again for coming. And
Thank
maybe we'll
you.
see you at part 3.